doesn't know, I thought it would be really funny to start off with this GIF, because if, like me, you get a job in, I got a job in AAA game development. We use Slack, we use a lot of GIFs, we use a lot of emojis, and whether or not it's a good or a bad thing, the frequency that I see this GIF in my DMs or on various Slack channels about issues or various things happening to do with development, I think this is a really good way to describe QA, but more on that later. So, what am I even talking about while I'm here? I am going to tell you first a little bit about myself. Who am I? What is QA? How do you get a job in QA with no experience? And crunch, let's be honest about it, address it. It is a real thing. It happens in solo, indie, AA, AAA projects, everywhere in the games industry. And sometimes we just need to talk about it, be honest that it actually happens. What's the career progression look like? The discipline differences and the best practices in the discipline of QA. And then the tools of the trade. All of the different pieces of software that we use on a day-to-day basis, at least from my personal experience. And there will be some that I haven't listed in that, but there will be equivalents to those things. So let's get started. Who am I? If anybody hasn't seen the Jackie Chan film, Who Am I beg you to please go and see it. I am a big dog dad. I have 2 dogs. I live in London. They are everything to me. One is currently sleeping at my feet. The other is in the hall waiting for my wife to come home from work. I'm also a husband. As I've just said, waiting for my wife to come home from work. She's a vet nurse, works a lot with animals, and at some point on this Teams call, you are probably going to hear her come home from work, and we're going to have to deal with that noise, and that's fine because life happens. And we don't live alone on this earth. We have a lot of other people that we live amongst. I'm obsessed with cooking. At the moment, I'm reading from the 3 Michelin star book, The French Laundry by Thomas Keller. He's an amazing, amazing chef. And currently, I am learning how to roast the finest chicken on earth. I'm a lifelong gamer. At the moment, I am playing Dune Awakening. I have jumped off Dune to come and give this talk to you guys now and to answer some questions about QA. And I have played games ever since my dad bought me and my little brother a second-hand PlayStation when I was, I'd say, probably about 8 years old. I'm a massive mental health advocate. That's how Ashraf knows me. I was named as one of the Game Awards Future Class for, correct me if I'm wrong, Ash, I think it was 2022. And I have always been a big mental health advocate, making sure people are looked after, make sure they feel heard, and so that while primarily during game development, everybody doesn't feel like they're on their own. They don't feel like they're too stretched out. I really like the quote from Bilbo Baggins in The Lord of the Rings, butter scraped over too much bread, because sometimes when we've got too much on and a lot to do, that's how we can feel. And I want to make sure that happens as little as possible. And last but not least, I'm a QA analyst at Rocksteady Studios. I started just about 3.5 years ago. I started as a junior QA tester with no previous experience in the games industry, and I've worked my way up through the ranks from QA tester, senior QA tester, and now QA analyst. And I did all of that in that order for a reason. It wasn't to kind of end on the best till last thing. It's that while developing your projects, when you're developing your demo, which I believe is the purpose for this talk, of having people who are making a demo kind of get some experience on other disciplines, I wanted to really emphasize that my identity isn't wholly tied to the fact that I'm a games developer and I work in the games industry. And that wasn't always the case. When I got my job at Rocksteady, I was like, the dream has come true. I'm now a game developer. That is who I am. And with that, well, I basically found out that along the way that that's not true. I am a lot of other things as well that are equally and sometimes more important than my job. And also acknowledging and really owning the fact that I am all of those other things before the fact that I'm a QA analyst at Rocksteady makes me better at my job as well. Because I can go home, I can decompress, disconnect, do other things that I love, and then come back to my job afterwards. So, on to the reason why we're all here. What is QA? Found this a little bit funny, so I just put this here. But basically, QA is quality assurance. The QA department is responsible for ensuring the fact that all the different features of video game development pass the necessary quality gates that are set during the planning phase of concept and pre-production, pass those quality gates when they should, and then eventually all come together as a whole finished and playable product that is stable. And after release, if it is a title that has the budget to be supported post-release, the quality is continued after that fact. I do actually kind of think it's funny at the end of what I actually do, because a lot of the time you are basically holding people accountable for all of the problems that go on with game development. And sometimes with this big monkey here scratching his head, that's a lot of what you're going to end up doing if you do get a job as a QA tester. So how do you get into it with no experience? QA is quite often a kind of entry level position, is what we call in the industry. These are basically my biggest kind of tips on how you get into it if you want to pursue it as a career, if it is something that you want to do, if it's something that you're interested in, is to basically start with where you want to work, make a list of all the studios you want to work with. And I'm kind of coming from personal experience here because that is exactly what I did. I made a list of all the studios that I would basically cut my hand off to work at, and I started applying to those. I would also learn how to use industry standard software. Now we'll get on to the tools of the trade, as it were, in a little bit. But what I ended up doing to help me get my job at Rocksteady is I looked around on the internet and found out what the more commonplace pieces of software were for game developers, especially QA, to use for their day-to-day. And one of those pieces of software was an Atlassian piece of software called Jira, which is a database for tracking production, primarily for QA's purposes, bug tickets, and how to create those and how to manage a project within Jira, which then was incredibly beneficial when, luckily enough, I was given an interview for Rocksteady. And they said, well, what sets you apart from everybody else? And I was able to tell them and also show them that I had made a fake project in Jira with all the relative assignees, bug tickets, tasks, and everything completely tracked in a lovely spider's web. I do actually wish I still had that with me to show to you today, but unfortunately I don't. I would then utilize industry mentoring schemes and organizations to communicate and gain advice from industry professionals. Now, this is something that I've learned after the fact, that there are several mentoring schemes throughout the games industry where you can sign up either as a graduate, as a student. There are some also for people from marginalized backgrounds as well, like Into Games, Out Making Games, Limit Break, all of those where you can sign up and be assigned a mentor who is a games industry professional. And you can list all of the goals that you want to achieve when you're making either a demo project or whether or not you just want a mentor to kind of take you through your day-to-day and help bounce ideas off of them. It's a really valuable thing. And this year I'm actually taking part in Limit Break's 2025 scheme as one of their mentors. And also, if there aren't any studio-based QA jobs available, why not try a third-party outsourcing company? So with everybody making their demos now, if you don't have the scope, the budget, the time to do QA yourself on either your solo or your indie project, if you're a smaller company, it is sometimes a lot more affordable to go for outsourcing partners whose sole job is to outsource the discipline of QA and take that on and do all your testing for you. And some of these people are absolute experts in their field. You can go to their outsource partner managers and say, I want somebody to test performance. I want somebody to test UI, UX, audio. And if it's a company like Redkite, Keywords, Red Cerberus, MTL, they have amazing experts who are dedicated professionals in various aspects of QA to give you the best kind of possible experience and help you launch your game. It's also okay to admit that you don't know everything. It is also your employer's job to teach you the skills, and it is your job to show up with the right attitude. This is something that I try to impart to juniors. It's also something that I try to bear in mind myself when I'm trying to learn anything new, is that you're not expected to know everything when you're starting out. So please feel free, and it is perfectly okay to ask for help. And then lastly, talk about who you are and what you love and what you do in games and also outside games, and embrace your individuality. What makes you up as a person is the most unique and valuable thing that can help get your project off the ground and help ensure that you are as authentic as you possibly can be in your team, and try not to artificially fit somebody else's mold. Being yourself is a hell of a lot more valuable. On to the next thing, crunch. This is going to just be a short little thing, but if you're in QA and any other discipline of the games industry, ideally, when you're trying to concept your idea for a project, when you're in pre-production, you would scope the whole project out and it would be perfect. That is an ideal situation. It doesn't always happen. And this is where crunch comes in. For those that don't know, crunch is mandatory overtime. It is what is often needed to do at some point in a project where people are working longer than they would usually work, or if you're an employee at a company, what would be longer than your contracted hours. And historically, controversially, at some companies in the past, the games industry hasn't been great with it. There have been some controversial stories of certain companies not paying their employees or underpaying their employees for crunch. And quite often these days, I would hope that if anybody is crunching, they do get paid at overtime and they get paid adequate overtime. Hopefully this doesn't happen. Hopefully you don't have to do this on your own projects, or if and when you find yourself jobs in the industry, you don't have to do this. But it's important that this is a subject that we talk about. And it's also important that if you are doing crunch, if you are doing overtime, that you're honest about the impact that it has on you as a person. I have worked on projects where I have worked longer hours than usual sometimes, and I have suffered for it, both physically, mentally. Doing work longer than you usually do takes any kind of toll on people. And personally, for me, in my own experience, it was my own choice to do that. I didn't realize how much of a toll it would take on me. And so I try not to do overtime now when I don't have to. But if you do have to, please be honest about the impact that it has on you. What does QA career progression look like? So, as we've already started saying, I started as a junior QA tester. You then move into QA tester, senior QA tester or analyst, QA lead, and you have QA supervisor and manager. But what does the day-to-day of those look like? A junior QA tester is basically just playing the game. It is a slightly more complex version of what the public perception of what QA is, of where people are just playing games for a living. It's a little bit more complicated than that. You are recording what you're doing, you are finding issues in the game, and you're using either tools that the developers have created to help you bug issues, and then you're using a database tracking piece of software like Jira to document those issues and send them to the game developers. A QA tester is basically a more proficient junior QA tester. There's a lot more room for error with a junior QA tester, and you're basically finding your feet and doing a lot of training. Senior QA testers and analysts are where it gets a little bit more complicated. Senior QA tester is a lot more knowledgeable. They maybe have specialized knowledge and have more of a day-to-day embedded with certain teams. And a QA analyst is quite often somebody who lives more in the database, does a lot more of the management side of QA testing as opposed to more often practical QA testing of what a senior QA tester does, and spends a lot more time looking after the database health, database management, talking with production and the other developers to make sure that QA's vision and the development and production visions for the project are meeting and not butting heads. A QA lead basically oversees all of this kind of stuff. In some companies, there are going to be several QA leads, so that way each person has somebody that they can go to for either one-to-one advice, some guidance, and so the project has a wider reach. And last but not least, they're supervisors and managers. These are the people who are going to be at the top of the QA food chain, talking with studio leaders, production heads, and making sure that the continued vision for the project is going in the right way when it gets down to QA. Those are also the people that are going to be creating your test plans as well as the leads. So playthrough or feature, what's the difference? I suppose I should probably go through what playthrough or feature actually is. So we'll start with playthrough. A playthrough team, they have the broadest view of the project. This is usually if you get a job in QA, if you have QA testers on your teams, these are going to be a very valuable resource for you. They're going to have the broadest view, they're going to touch all aspects of your game, and they are relied on to ensure the overall stability, reporting of daily critical issues, including performing daily smoke tests. What I mean by smoke tests are usually when I get into work, or at most studios, we're cooking a build overnight or every other day, depending on the size of your project. Whenever you get a new build, you need to make sure that it works. That's what we'd call a smoke test. We're looking for smoke, hopefully not fire. Hopefully we don't see any smoke and we can just get on with our day. As far as other aspects of playthrough testing, you are basically kind of a jack of all trades when it comes down to game development. You're not an expert in any one area, and if somebody comes to you and wants to either view a certain level, know about whether the stability of a certain area of the game, you're basically going to be the person that they go to if you're a playthrough tester, because you're going to know about stability and you're also going to be assigned a large part of the game to play through on any given day, making sure that those are either clear of issues or the issues within them are documented. There are also feature teams comprising of disciplines, whether that is any of the dedicated development disciplines of things like audio, RPG and UI, character art, technical animation, render, engine, and so on. Feature testers, they have a very focused view of that particular game area, and they have any specialized training and expertise for that discipline. That means bespoke debug that they will have very focused training on. They will be the people that playthrough testers will go through to get a more expert view on certain issues if they can't debug them themselves. They will also work on a day-to-day basis with particular development teams for those areas. Now, if you're on a solo project or in a, shall we say, a smaller team, playthrough and feature can be kind of coinciding, and you kind of have to be both of those things, and you have to look for the importance of what is most relevant on a given day. I helped consult on a project, an indie project that only had a very, very small team of developers, and they only had one in-house QA who then delegated to a team of outsourced testers. And a lot of the time, playthrough, feature, smoke, testing, all of that stuff fell on this one person to then really manage a database and prioritize what they were going to ask of these outsourced testers to kind of do, because they budget was tighter on that project. When you're a smaller company, you have less money, and therefore you don't have as many bodies that you can throw at a problem. So you really do have to kind of be very clear in your communication with dedicated disciplines to kind of figure out what your highest priorities are for the given day and when you want things looked at. I've also been a member of both playthrough team and been a dedicated feature tester. So here we have your game testing life cycle. Some of this is going to be relevant, some is not going to be relevant. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So in concept and in pre-production, test case creation, or mid-development, if we're sometimes in mid-development creating features and developing them, sometimes they change, and then we create new test cases. Test environments, sometimes this is relevant, sometimes this is not, but for example, a lot of the time a test environment is not usually white boxed. Quite often, certainly in my experience, a test environment is just the level in the state that we have it in currently. Sometimes you don't always have a dedicated test level. Test execution is basically just, in my experience of being feature and playthrough, you're basically just playing what you're doing. You're making sure, based on relevant criteria in your test case. So let's say, for example, your test case is, does music play? Set the environment up, you've got your SFX hooked up, you've got your music hooked up. Test execution is you load into wherever it is. If the music plays, great, it works. If it doesn't, that's when we get to bug identification. Bug logging, very simple, but very important that we discuss with the relevant teams what their requirements are for bugs. Various different teams will have various different requirements of what they will need to be sent to them in order to fix various bugs, and having that information before you start is going to be a lot easier than just whacking in a very, very simple issue and then having it kind of batted back and forth almost like a tennis match between you and the developer. It's a lot easier if you ask beforehand. Fix verification, basically when somebody says it's fixed, you basically do the exact same thing in your test execution to make sure that it's fixed. And regression testing is this, and fixed verification is basically one and the same. You want to make sure that that issue is no longer happening. And then reporting the results is usually you would have your lead testers, your QA supervisors, managers reporting to the rest of production, or in some cases, junior to mid-level testers will be brought into those meetings as well to report their findings. That happened to me a few times on a project that I worked on, and it was very daunting having to talk to the technical director about things that I found. Tools of the trade. So a lot of this is used for wider game development, but this is everything I use in my toolbox on a day-to-day basis. So we have our Atlassian branded software, Jira and Confluence. These kind of come as a package deal. Confluence is a documentation tool. Jira is a database tracking piece of software, what we talked about for bugging issues and tracking the production and doing and completion of tasks. We then have our communication apps, Teams that we're on right now, Zoom and Slack. If you're on a bigger company in the games industry, Slack is almost always used universally. Visual Studio. Now, if you're working specifically with teams such as render teams, engine teams, having training in Visual Studio, knowing how to open and debug a crash dump file is absolutely critical. This is one of the first things that I learned at Rocksteady, and it is an invaluable piece of kit in your arsenal, because when you do crash, you do get a call stack with that crash dump file, especially if you're in Unreal Engine, you will usually have an Unreal error that appears with a call stack, and you can basically dump all of that file into Visual Studio. And if you have the binaries and symbols loaded, you can have a look and see what is causing that crash. I use this tool on a daily basis. OBS, if you've done any streaming in your time, you know what this is. This is what we're going to use for recording all of the stuff that we do. And it is absolutely vital because, well, we need to see what the issue is, and it's free, which is perfect for small studios. And TestRail. This piece of software is the bane of my life. I hate it, but nearly every company uses it or an equivalent of it. This is where we write test plans, test cases, and basically write acceptance criteria for all of the various different features that are being implemented during development. This is where all of those tests are tracked, and you can basically write out a whole test plan in TestRail, automate it, or start it manually, and then track through tick boxes what is being looked at. It can either be timed, it can be done during a day. It is really based on your needs. Honestly, I think it is a great piece of software, but I live staring at this thing, and sometimes I wish I saw it less than I do. My final thoughts before we get to any kind of questions. Know your strengths. You're making a demo now, you're starting off in the industry, or you're thinking about getting a job in the industry and you're kind of trying it out. Please be honest about why you do what you do. Is it a stepping stone, or is it a career, especially as QA? QA is the most common entry-level position in the entire industry. If you do try to get a job in QA, please be honest about why you're kind of going for it. It is perfectly fine to say that you're getting into QA to be a designer, to be a programmer, to be an artist, but there is nothing worse than saying that you're absolutely dedicated to a discipline and then switching when not being honest about it. It is a lot more beneficial to let people know why you're in there, and it also enables people to help you get the training that you need if it is something that you want to move on from, or if it's something that you want to stay in, because it is a legitimate career. Taking it upon yourself to communicate with all your colleagues is also a learned skill. It is not something, certainly, that I came into game development with having under my belt. It's not something that is particularly comfortable for me, but it is invaluable, not only to your team, but also to the entire company. If you're doing something as a group, if you're working as a team, if you are a part of a company doing game development, please seek your colleagues out instead of playing a game of tennis with your bug tickets, because it makes everything a lot more personable. It takes a lot less time. It speeds up game development. because we're just talking to each other and we're not relying on computers. Understand what each feature needs from QA to be effective and efficient. So we need to learn what each team does to better understand and be an expert in our own roles. That is very important. If you've only just started or you don't know a lot about QA and you want to ensure the quality of the thing that you're making, go to the people who are making those things and understand what they need. Ask them. They will not be offended. They will not be hurt. A lot of the time, they will be incredibly enthusiastic in talking about the thing that they're making because it's something that they love. We only get into this job because we love it, right? So go and ask, go and learn, and it will make you a better tester. It will make you able to ensure the quality of your product better. And if you ever need help, like I've just said, ask for it. This is a team sport and it is a marathon and not a sprint. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about my discipline. Let's get some questions.
Awesome. So, Jamie, thank you so much. Can you hear me, by the way?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you so much for this talk, first of all. That was really, really wonderful. Folks, for any of you that have questions, please, you can type them in here. I have like a couple of questions on the side as well. Um, so the first one was actually about QA testing with friends. So
Yes,
let's say that I have, oh, hello, who is this?
this is Monty. Monty is
Hello,
very
Monty.
impatient and he is willing to try and help me answer all of your questions.
That is very, very cute. So guys, any questions you have, either DM me or put them in the chat. So the first question I got was actually about QA testing with friends. So generally, whenever I'm making a game or someone's making a game, you're not really always sure about the best ways to test your game. Because, when I play my games, for example, I am very good at them because I made them, so I know exactly what to do. So if I were to ask my friends to help QA test, what are some tips I can give someone to make sure that they test the game as authentically as possible, while at the same time, um, letting them play as a player instead of as a, like, you know what I mean? I want them to try the game out, but I want them to also give me valuable feedback. So how can I transform my friends into junior QA testers, basically?
Okay, so the closest comparison I can kind of think of is almost like user research testers, right? So there will be games in a certain playable state where companies like Sony, for instance, I mean, before I got into the games industry, I did some market research where Sony or Microsoft would kind of hire me in and play a game in like a milestone, certain completed state. And and you basically be given a questionnaire at the end of it and kind of like, what did you think of this? What did you think of this? Um, my best advice is let them go in blind. Um, because if you, I mean, are we bug tracking? Are we trying to find issues, or are we just trying to gauge the player experience here? Because the two are very different things. If we're trying to really break the game, or maybe even not break the game, or just kind of find unexpected issues, let somebody play it completely blind. And I actually said this to my limit break mentee, is that try and avoid friends if possible. If you have ways and means to get a group of people who you don't know in the room to play your game, that would be a lot more valuable than getting your friends, getting your family in. Like, we all want our nearest and dearest to play the things that we spend so much time agonizing over, but at the end of the day, they have a bias towards you and may be more hesitant to critique or say something is broken, or I have an issue with this, or I wish this was different, or oh, this doesn't work, um, because they know you and they care about you. Whereas somebody who is less emotionally tied to you as a human being is more likely to be candid about their experience.
I see. So actually, one of the things we did quite recently, actually it's been like a month or so, I don't know. We had like a game showcase here in Lab. A friend of mine organized it. We got a few games, we got them together, and we did something very similar to this. We had like a big table with like 6 or 7 games just like wrapped around it, and then each of us had like a little QR code with a feedback form for our game. It was kind of almost what you mentioned. It's just, I guess we were a bit all over the place with the questions. So you mentioning that it's important to know whether you're testing for gameplay, whether you're testing for bugs, whether you're testing for something else completely, I guess that's a very, very important thing to highlight as well. And the fact that it was open to the public means it was open to strangers. And this very much let us see whether people were enjoying the game because they wanted to play it, or whether they were playing the game because other, like, you know what I mean, like if it was because of interest or if it was because of respect for the person and just, coming to try their game because it's a friend or whatever. So
Yeah,
that's really, really interesting. Actually, I do have another question from my end. So
sure.
one of the games that we're having problems testing is a very emotionally heavy game. So it's
Okay.
not fun. It is the kind of game that you would play by yourself in, and because it's a very raw game, it's a very, I'm not going to say emotional, but it does contain a lot of emotion. So it's not the kind of game that you can play at like Gamescom or like some event or something. So how would you test something like this, or like, because the environment ruins the playtesting ability. So how can you get strangers to try out a game like this without causing them to break NDA, or without something of the sort, basically?
Um, I mean, I think the answer is kind of twofold, really. One is kind of, or at least from my perspective of one, how do you communicate the theme of a game when it is emotionally hard hitting while still letting somebody kind of explore that? You don't want to give away the secret, but you also kind of want to have a PSA there to kind of safeguard people when it is emotionally sensitive content. Um, at the same time, all you can do is, um, I mean, I think the best thing is potentially having a release form, like like having somebody sign a release form to say that, look, this content is under a certain level of embargo, and to please not share any information relating to what they're playing, so as not to damage other people's experience, but also to ensure the experience of somebody when the game does actually also release. Um, I think the more important part is the first thing, though, is emotionally safeguarding people. When there is sensitive content, you want to make sure that the themes of the content are kind of there for the player to decide whether or not they want to engage with that. And that is going to be a double-edged sword. Sometimes you're going to get people who just don't want to engage with that content at all, and there are going to be some people that are either curious or really enthusiastic to kind of engage with that. It will be a mixed bag. um, for instance, I knew what the theme of The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2 was going to be before I played it. However, I I had avoided spoilers and I had an amazing experience for it. But it wasn't an enjoyable thing to play, right? Like I didn't come away from it thinking like I'm really happy right now. Like it emotionally wrecked me. And if Neil Druckmann, if I ever meet you, I will tell you. But it's the themes were there. I knew about them and I felt safe enough at the time to go into it. And I think if you're conscious enough to avoid also what you want to avoid, like if you're in an event and there are a group of people, they're playing a thing, you get them to sign a thing, please don't share it. If there are people abusing that or talking about it in one way or another, I think you just have to also let it up to kind of like human nature of to just consciously choose to avoid that. You can't kind of police everybody, unfortunately.
Yep. Awesome. That makes sense. Thank you. So we have a question from Mustafa. So he says that when you playtest the same game for a while, you start to learn its ins and outs, and you may discover shortcuts or unique ways to progress through the game. So when testing for bugs in general, should you always remain objective, or is it better to use the prior knowledge to your advantage?
That's a really good question. Thank you for that, Mustafa. So it's always useful to know how many times you can complete something, right? Um, I would try and go into something, I think, usually, certainly for me, I have an 8.5 hour workday, right? A lot of that time is going to be spent in game. If, let's say, I have a level with 3 different avenues, and on one day I spend all my time trying to go down Avenue 1, and I find a bunch of issues. Now, I can prioritize going down Avenue 2 the next day, Avenue 3 the next day. It's really based on kind of like your own kind of wants, needs. How quickly can you get through the level? How many bugs are there per level? Um, I mean, if you find a shortcut, is that shortcut intended? Do we want that shortcut in there? That's a question that you've got to answer. Um, is it something that exploits the system? That might be a bug then. Um, at the end of the day, there is no right or wrong way. I would use prior knowledge of shortcuts to more exploratory test the game. Like if you have a mechanic that allows you to jump over various things, if it allows you to get to your objective a hell of a lot faster than taking the critical golden intended path, see how much you can push that boundary. Like, I think I mean, a good analogy might be look at the Elder Scrolls, look at Skyrim. Think of how many times, if you spam that jump button enough, you can essentially push yourself over unintended infinite levels of collision. Now, they kept that in the game, but for you, that might be different. You might not want that. You might want to push it to a certain boundary that then allows you to kind of say, okay, whoa, that's enough. That's as far as we want it to go. But you're the only person that can really decide that.
Okay, that's super interesting. And actually, I thought about something else while you were answering this question, which is sometimes you get a problem with, let's say you're playing a roguelike, okay, and you find like an item that blazes through everything. So you might end up deciding to use this to playtest the stuff. But if you end up using a certain item, doesn't this technically mean that it's broken in a way that could cause more problems because now the game is unbalanced? So in a case like this, like, would you report this to try to fix it, or would you just be like, I'm happy with this playstyle, I'm just gonna go with this?
I am definitely aware of myself with some friends that we've had these kind of discussions of like, do you like if we really like something when we're working on a project and then we're like, do we want to talk about this? Because like this would be like this completely breaks what we're trying to make, but it's really cool to use. Um, that's a really kind of fun example. And the answer is a conversation should always happen. Like it starts with flagging it, right? If you're in a team of people, raise it, have a chat about it. How does the because it may feel super overpowered. You play this thing over and over and over again. You're super used to the mechanics of your game. Somebody else might not feel the same way. They might be like, this is a terrible weapon. This is a terrible item. I don't know how, or they don't know how to use it as efficiently. Um, but if you, my professional advice is that start a conversation. Say, hey, this feels a little bit broken. What do you think? Send them a video. show them some footage or pull them over to your desk and have them watch you use the thing. That way they get the most authentic experience of that example. And then that way, if you're the relevant stakeholder in having a decision on whether or not something changes, then that conversation can continue with you. Or if you're in a larger company, that can then get taken up the chain to design, to production, or even to kind of studio heads if it's a big enough decision that they want to overhaul a large part of the game to accommodate it. But it always starts with a conversation. And as QA, like I said, like at the beginning and also at the end of my slides, the most important tool in your arsenal is communication. If you don't talk to your colleagues, it's just not going to work.
Okay, absolutely. That does make sense. And actually, so this final question on this point, I promise, and then we'll move to Ahmed's question.
Fine.
So if you are making a game like it's a PvP game, okay, so like a 5v5 or XVX or whatever, like some
Yeah.
kind of online game where you can be a different character or you can have different weapons or blah blah blah. And let's say it just happens in a way where you are someone that's just extremely good at a certain thing and you're just working there technically. You're not like you are not the expected audience, quote unquote, but at the same time, you're just someone that's extremely good at a thing. How do you avoid being like, oh yeah, this thing is definitely overpowered when you yourself are just really, really good at it? So just to follow this up with like one tiny thing, I was talking to Ram Ismail, and he was talking about his roguelike. I forgot what it was called. It's gonna what was the game called? Guys, do you remember? It was. I want to look this up actually. But anyway, so in his roguelike, the general rule for the final boss was the game designer was absolutely able to beat it, and he was never able to beat it. So that was basically how they kind of balanced the game out. But as you know, a fan of roguelikes, I might end up making something that's way too difficult for the average player to beat. So how do you balance that as someone that's supposed to be conscious of your audience?
Have other people play it is a very just like the simple thing is like if you're building something and you're like, oh my God, like I'm amazing at this, and but then the skill level generally, Nuclear Throne, I don't know that game. I want to play that game. Okay, that
Okay.
sounds awesome. That sounds like a great title as well. Yes, I would
hmm hmm
absolutely get a large enough pool of people and be like, this is how I play it, show them how, or even have them go in blind, and then just see if they can figure it out. If they can't,
Okay.
just like when user research testing, ask halfway through, like if you've got a multiple section test, or if you're just getting to them to test one area, that one thing, ask them about it, have a bunch of questions. What did you like about this? What was your favorite bit? What was your least favorite bit? Did you find any areas particularly difficult? Really let them dig into what it was about them, collate all of that data and see what commonalities there are there, and then tweak as needed. Because at the end of the day, you might be making something because you love a thing, but you're not the audience. You're not the one that's going to buy this.
100%, 100%. Awesome. Thank you. That was a really wonderful answer. So we have a question from Ahmed as well. And Ahmed says, how do you make a polished game with the least number of bugs possible? And what processes do you use? So this was
That's
what the
a
talk was
big
about.
question. So that's a really big question. I will try and break it down. So it starts with an ideally, and I'm saying this is like in an ideal world, because I will be perfectly honest, QA is not brought onto a project at all companies at all times at the optimal point in development for QA to be brought onto a project. Sometimes they are brought on later than would be ideal. Sometimes, or this could be for budgetary reasons. Sometimes this could be down to less than ideal decision making. Um, it really does depend, but I believe, and the slight PSA of all of my opinions and the things that I say are the opinions of me and myself and not of my company and my employer, blah, 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 is that I believe QA should be on a project from the get-go. I believe that QA starts with conversations. It starts with talking to the relevant people who are going to be making the relevant things about what those things are, how, and this is a back and forth conversation. This isn't just somebody telling you what they need and then you going off and doing your own thing and trying to figure it out. This is a back and forth conversation, really digging into and discussing what people need to adequately make sure something works. And this isn't something that starts and ends at concept and pre-production, and then during production QA is just off doing that thing. For the whole of the development, that conversation is going on. It just evolves. And it lives within the varying quality gates that you end up getting on. Kind of like you built a foundation with that initial conversation, and then you start with your other building blocks and of kind of writing your test plans, making sure the developers have and programmers have adequate test environments or levels white boxed to test various features, then making sure those basic functionalities work within those test environments or white box levels of the environment that your game takes place in. And then the quality bar is raised incrementally over time so that the level is polished, the features become more complex, until eventually that conversation has continued to the point where you're at alpha and beta and then launch. And hopefully those conversations continue either into the next project or in post-launch support if the project can afford it.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a great answer. Ahmad, let us know if you have any more questions as well.
Yes,
So,
please do.
awesome. Hassan also has a question. So he says, what is the best approach to organize and build a complex slash high scope game alone? I love how the questions being directed at you are like, how do we make a game? How do we do everything? And you're just like summarizing it so succinctly. It's really, really nice. So
I
thank you.
I am trying my best, and my best is taking all of the information that I have gained from friends, colleagues, and peers and trying to parrot that information to you as well as I can. None of this information is mine alone. It's based on my own experiences, all the experiences of those of my friends and colleagues. And that's a really important thing, I think, to kind of like start with this answer, is that how do you build something alone? How do you, I mean, the answer is you don't. Um, that's a very simple answer. Like you can be a solo dev and still ask for the experience and the view set and the skill set of your peers and your friends. One of the main things that I kind of mentioned in quite early on in my talk was kind of trying to utilize mentors. And Ash, I know that you and I are big advocates of using mentors and peers with more experience than us in the in the industry to try and get a view of kind of where our visions can go and how they can evolve over time. And I think that's a very holistic view of kind of game development, and it's something that kind of feeds itself. And when you talk to one person, it can snowball into another conversation with another person. That's really how you build your network as well as a professional, if it's something you want to grow out of doing things on your own. But it all starts with find the people who inspire you or who you look up to and reach out. It really is kind of as simple as that. I mean, Ash, we were kind of put in a very fortunate position being members of Future Class to have these people, these amazing visionaries in our industry kind of put in front of us for Q&A sessions. But second to that is LinkedIn as a tool that we're all able to use. And while it may feel quite alien to almost cold call somebody and ask for their experience, their strength, and their hope on the kind of things that they do for a living and the things that you want to do yourself. Um, there is nothing wrong with firing off a message to somebody that you inspire and say, hey, or somebody that inspires you and say, hey, your work really inspires me and I'm trying to do this thing, but I can't figure it out. Do you have any time or do you have any tips or experience on kind of where to start with that?
Yeah, do you mind if I add a few things to what you said as well?
Absolutely. Go for
So,
it.
honestly, I really love how you veered the conversation into ask for help because Hassan, honestly, making a thing alone is very, very hard. I don't know if you've seen there was this thing about someone who wanted to make a toaster from scratch. And from scratch meant he literally went to the mines and he like got the pieces of metal and he melted them and then he tried to actually make a toaster. So it depends on what you mean by actually build a complex game alone. Like, are you also making the art, for example? Or are you grabbing these assets from somewhere? Because if you're even if you're paying for them, technically someone else made them. If you are drawing the stuff yourself, are you also like what is the base level of what do you mean by alone, you know? But generally, let's assume that you do want to build a complex game alone. You'll have to start with a very core section of your game, and then you're going to have to build around this over time. Now, the amount of time it takes, the amount of effort it takes, the amount of experience you need will depend on whatever it is you're trying to build. So the best approach is to try, it's to do, and it's to test. And I think out of all of these, the most important part is the testing, because when you are working alone on a thing, the biggest problem is you are the only one that's seeing what your game is about. And if you're the only one that sees it, the entire player scope is one person. You might enjoy the game, but you don't know what anyone else feels about it. So in our first gaming academy session, we had a guy that worked on Pokemon Go come and give us a talk. He told us that when he was making his first game, he found out that some people really had a problem with one of the jumps that he had. So he added a few analytics and found out that a jump that he got 10 out of 10 times, everyone else got 2 out of 10 times. And this was because he was the only one that was testing the thing out. So the best approach is basically add people to your group in one way or another. But again, if you cannot do that personally, have more people play your game over time, and you would be surprised how many people are interested in helping out if you treat them well and if you just approach them nicely. So a lot of my friends actually from the first gaming academy are now making their own games. Because they're passionate about the thing that they're making, because they love what they're building. So if the problem is getting people because you can't pay them. Sometimes excitement is enough to build a thing. Not saying do that to burn out, but I am saying that you can start a thing, a very serious thing with just each other, and grow it from there. But to go back to just directly answering your question, start with a basic concept, make sure it feels good, and start building around that while testing whatever it is you're doing. So, yeah. All right. Do we have any more questions on this end? I'm gonna check Discord as well to see if anyone sent anything there. Awesome. Cool. Great. So Jamie, thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful. If people want to follow you, talk to you, something of the sort, is there anywhere they can find you or something? Or yeah.
Yes, they can absolutely find me. I will quickly, because I was not prepared enough to have my LinkedIn link ready.
No worries.
Um, Come on, internet, do me a favor and work.
Here, I can help out as well, probably.
All right, I got you. There
Awesome.
is my LinkedIn. If you'd like to stay in touch, if you have any questions, or if you would like me to consult on your demo and just answer any kind of targeted survey kind of questions that you have about your projects, or you're just like, hey, I'm in crisis. I need somebody to hear me rant about my worries of game development. Um, if you feel open to and willing, please just give me a shout. I'd be more than happy to listen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for coming today and preparing this wonderful talk. Folks, thank you again for attending. Jamie will speak soon, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.